To determination about is the future of RPGs, and in particularly the future of JRPGs here on DSP Gaming. And the reason that I bring it up in that manner is because I find that in the last few years, all right, I see more and more of these ultra lengthy RPGs that are coming out, and people ask me to play them, and it's always a tough decision because you got to understand the difference between committing to a game that potentially could be 10, 20, maybe 30 hours long, which could take a few weeks to beat, versus a game that you know from the get-go when you're getting into it, right, is going to be a 40 to 80 hour experience minimum. And that just means that this is going to be a game that's going to be ongoing. It's not a game that you can play every day because it's not for every person. It's certainly not for every mainstream audience viewer. And it's got to be something that is balanced with other stuff, but it's going to take quite a long time to get through.
I know I say a lot that DSP is the only content creator that I see do a plethora of different things, but I've never heard anybody complain that they were getting too much game when they bought a game. Because any normal person would be absolutely ecstatic that they got as many hours out of a game as possible for their money. But it's not DSP's money. He doesn't care how long it is. In fact, the shorter the better. He can get it on the conveyor belt and get it right off. And that mentality really comes through in his content. You can very clearly see that he isn't enjoying any of these games. Not really enjoying them, despite all of the things that he says. And he's also the only other content creator that I've ever heard say that they can't play one game consistently or every day because it's not for everybody. Other content creators do this all the time. They play a game for a week straight right after it comes out, and then they move on to the next game the following week after they've experienced everything that they wanted to experience in a game. But for some reason, when it comes to DSP and his content, he insists on playing a different game just about every other day so that nobody is actually invested in the game and what's going on. It's just a very weird way to do things. He prides himself on this weird variety that he has, but I don't know if that's necessarily a positive on his channel. It's just jarring and strange.
And it used to be, you know, real talk here, when I started on YouTube 15 years ago, and even over the course of the last decade, it used to be that maybe you would see 2 or 3 major RPGs in a year, if that, okay? Perfect example. I remember, you know, years ago, looking at Dragon Quest XI. And at that point, it was a big decision for me. I was like, man, should this be a game that I play or not? Because I've never played a Dragon Quest game on my YouTube channels. There hasn't actually been a mainstream one that's released. And, you know, we talked about it and ultimately said, let's take a chance on it. And listen, it didn't do that well as a daytime stream game. We did play it as several daytime streams, but mostly it worked as a late night session game. And it ended up taking forever. Like, I remember the game being over 80 hours because essentially it's 2 stories in one. They did such a great job with the content of that game to have almost 2 completely different plot lines in it. But when I finished it, I told you guys that was one of the most meaningful, relaxing, interactive playthroughs I had ever done. Like, I was so happy that I'd taken the time to go through that game at a slow pace and enjoy it for what it was with a live audience. That it was so different than back in the day when I used to play RPGs for myself. To have that live audience was meaningful, right?
And anybody who's familiar with DSP's content is well aware by now that the late night chill streams are some of the most boring pieces of media that's ever been produced. Don't get me wrong, very often there is gold dust in there, just little tidbits that he decides to share because he's absolutely bored out of his mind and has nothing else to talk about. But overall, the experience is terrible. Think Minecraft late chill streams and PUBG chill streams. Also, the time placement of the game is a very obvious indication of how well that game is performing as far as DSP is concerned. Any game that isn't receiving the amount of support that he expects it to get gets immediately demoted to the night stream, because he kind of treats his night stream like a second-class stream, which is kind of unfair and unfortunate for all of his overseas foreign-style viewers, which he claims to have many of. He's constantly going on about how people all over the world watch him, and he doesn't have just an American-centric audience, but then he screws them over by doing these god-awful night streams that nobody cares about. Imagine tuning into your favorite streamer and every time you do, they're playing the most boringest narrative-based RPG that you just don't care about, while he plays all of the fun action-based puzzle-style platformer games on the day stream while you're asleep. Just doesn't seem very considerate to his audience while he's sitting here telling us how meaningful and awesome it was to have an audience for his Dragon Quest XI streams.
But the thing is, I'm a live streamer. I'm a variety live streamer. I'm not just the RPG guy, right? I mean, sheesh, I'm definitely not. I think that when I play these kind of games, I hate to say it, but I'm going to be honest. Sadly, I don't think tons of people come out to watch me play RPGs. Now, there's exceptions. I would say that Western RPGs, okay? The ones that are not as Japanese-centric, the ones that are more, and a lot of times action-based, okay? As opposed to like slow turn-based or heavy narrative, the ones that have more action to them. Those tend to at least get a decent amount of people invested and interested who come out and will check out every stream, engage, and support, okay? But it seems like when I go for the straight-up JRPG style, right? The old-school turn-based, long, drawn-out narrative, lots of dialogue and cutscenes, and especially if it's very Japanese-centric when it comes to the culture, right? Those seem to be the ones that, for me, just don't do as well. Now, I'm not saying they tank and no one shows up. I'm just saying you can see a distinct difference between me playing a JRPG versus a Western action-based RPG on my streams. Just some examples here. Compare over the last several years when I've played games such as Fallout New Vegas, Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, or Oblivion, all right? Or recently, Baldur's Gate 3, right? Compare that to me, say, playing any Yakuza game. You know, I just played the Yakuza Like a Dragon, or I should say Like a Dragon Gaiden, or a Judgment game, right? Or hell, even a Persona game, or you know what I'm saying? Or Final Fantasy, a classic Final Fantasy, like when we played Final Fantasy V last year, right? Direct comparison, apples to apples, which you should be, it's not even the same. You'll definitely get a bigger crowd, more engagement and interest and support for the Western games. Now, you might argue various reasons why, right? And that's fine, because I actually have a few theories of my own. But the truth is, the why doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter why more people come to watch me play Western RPGs. What matters is, what does that mean for the future of JRPGs on this channel?
But I really would love to hear your theory as to why that is the case though, DSP. Because I can tell you, it's just because that's the audience that you've cultivated. Not everybody is into every style of video game, and that's why being a variety streamer like you are is a difficult task to pull off. Because then it becomes more about your personality and who you are as a person and how entertaining you can be, rather than consistently playing a game that people enjoy. Because people aren't going to enjoy every game that you play when you're a variety streamer. That's just the way that these things go. But you fail consistently every single day to display any sort of personality that people can get behind, that people can be entertained by. And I mean be entertaining in the way that you actually want to be entertaining, not the way that you entertain all of the detractors and trolls. And I can't blame your audience for not being entertained when you play these long narrative-driven RPGs, especially if they're turn-based. Because you don't provide anything worth of substance in your commentary. They might as well just go watch a walkthrough with no commentary to see the story if that's what they really care about. But I'm absolutely baffled that it's taken you this long to actually realize that these games are not the games for your audience. How are you so out of touch with an audience that you claim to be interacting with and having meaningful experiences with every single day? You go out of your way to get their feedback on things as mundane as titles and thumbnails, but don't know what games they prefer to watch all day long while you play them? It just seems to me like you're focusing on the wrong things, and this time I'm not talking about focusing on your sexy.
Because I love them. Okay, I grew up playing JRPGs because there were no Western RPGs when I was growing up, at least on console. Like, maybe they were very PC-centric in the 90s. But for me, you know, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Wild Arms, okay, Suikoden. Like, these were classic series that I grew up playing that I loved. And they're very much the old-school turn-based stuff. And, you know, I grew up playing that, and I love that style. And that's why today when I jump into a new game like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, right, or Sea of Stars, and I see a lot of people who come by to give it a shot and like, oh, I can't take it. It's too slow. It's too boring. It's too this or that. And I'm like, but this is what I'm used to. This is what I grew up playing. I love this. You know, Sea of Stars, which implements so many gameplay elements from classic RPGs of my youth. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth that has refined upon its formula from the last game and made it something better and different in the sequel, right? I love it. But sadly, it doesn't seem to resonate with most of my audience.
And I don't think it's resonating because that passion that you're speaking about these games with is not showing through in your gameplay. I've seen you play these long JRPGs before, and without fail, every single time it seems to be the exact same thing. You providing little to no commentary on the game, you have no deep insight into the game, you barely understand the mechanics, you get frustrated when it asks you to grind, the music is just on loop for ages because it takes you so long to do anything that it just becomes annoying. annoying, and you have one of the least interesting reading voices I've ever heard anybody have. You narrating the dialogue from a JRPG is better than NyQuil. All my Insomniac style viewers need to just turn on the Chrono Trigger playthrough, and I promise you're gonna be out like a light. Or at least that would be the case if he could help himself from beg every single hour while swaying back and forth into the microphone and peeking the whole time. There really just is no upside to DSP playing these games, so again, I absolutely understand why his audience isn't going for it, because no matter how much he claims to love these games, it just doesn't mean anything to the final product.
Case in point, right now I'm juggling a few different games. This week, the new releases are Tekken 8 and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. My first stream of Tekken 8 on Friday night went really well, high views. The videos here on YouTube have already done good. I think they've got a couple thousand views on them, each for King and Paul, which is good to see that people are excited for these new fighting game. And hell, even yesterday when I played the story mode of Tekken 8, was I expecting much? Honestly, no. I wasn't expecting a lot. I didn't know how it was gonna go. And we had a decent amount of people, and the views aren't superb or anything on YouTube, but fighting games are primarily known for its competitive nature and not for playing a narrative-based story mode. But even then, it did pretty good. Compare it to Like a Dragon, Like Dragon Infinite Wealth, that first stream, as soon as we started playing the game, a bunch of people left, and, support and engagement died off. We ended up going from over 400 viewers down to almost, barely 300 on the premiere stream, okay? And last night wasn't much better. In fact, it was worse. Last night we had even less and almost no support at all on the stream. Probably one of my deadest streams in a long, long time for a brand new release. All right?
Well, I and many other detractors have been telling you for ages, DSP, that you can't keep banking on new releases getting the viewers and the money. You need to adapt. You need to be a personality and a character that people want to come and see play every single game if you're going to insist on playing these variety style games. Because if you don't, this is going to keep happening, and it has been happening for a while. Your premiere streams are just getting less and less support. They're getting less and less viewers. Obviously, there is exceptions to that, but it's getting worse. But I do think it's kind of a no-brainer that Tekken 8 is going to get more viewers regardless of what game mode he's playing over Like a Dragon, because he did just play that other Like a Dragon game that came out in December, and even that didn't do terribly well on his streams. That got relegated to the night stream fairly quickly. So I don't know why he thought it was necessarily a good idea to do this one as soon as it came out. He probably should have gave it some sort of buffer time, should have put in a little bit of padding. But of course, he's chasing those day one views, so that option was never even on the table. It never crossed his mind. And that's before we even start talking about how DSP is technically a former professional fighting game player. Now, he was never necessarily all that good. I've been told that he is very mediocre. His best game was years ago in Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and even then he had no discipline. He wasn't that good. But regardless of how good he actually was, he is still technically a former professional. So somebody is going to value his fighting game opinion to some extent, even if they only come by for the meme just to see DSP be bad at fighting games. People in the FGC do know who DSP is, and they might swing by just for the lulz. That's not gonna happen with Like a Dragon. DSP has never been known as a Like a Dragon player or a JRPG player in general. That's never been his moniker. He keeps talking about comparing apples to apples, which honestly I don't even think is the saying, but regardless of whether it's a saying or not, it really is more apples to oranges, which I know is a saying, because these two games are drastically different. They're completely different genres, and they have different histories when it comes to DSP. So I'm not surprised that one is outperforming the other, not by a long shot.
Now again, we can argue the why, and I think one of the major reasons for that is because we just played a Like a Dragon game in Gaiden, and that game was over the course of December and a little bit of January, right? And that was kind of a necessary game to play because it bridges the gap between the last one and this one, and it shows you what happened in the interim with the character Kazuma Kiryu and why he's a part of this game. But I do feel like the timing, sadly, was just not good. They should have had that game come out earlier in the year. And when you say, well, why didn't they do that? Well, it's probably two reasons. Number one, because they already had another one in Like a Dragon Ishin, which is just a re-release of an older game, modernized, right? And, you can say, well, they probably wanted to polish Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth a little more or whatever, which is fine. But you've got to admit, having a Like a Dragon game come out in December, and then having literally the next game with the narrative continuing come out in late January, that's a lot of the same overload. Even though the playstyle isn't the same. Gaiden was more action-based, right? And Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth is now turn-based. It's still the same universe. It's still the same art style. It's the continuing plot, right? The plot's going to roll right into it. So I get it for those who are like, man, it feels like you just played this and you're playing it again. I agree with you.
So you agree with these people. You are also feeling the fatigue of Like a Dragon. You were well aware of the situation beforehand and decided to still play the game upon release, even though you were feeling Like a Dragon fatigue and potentially knew that your viewers were as well. That just shows how pig-headed you are. How you don't actually care about what content you're putting out and instead just chasing the almighty dollar. Because anybody who is aware of how their content works and cares about it would understand that if they are tired of a style of game, that they probably don't want to continue playing that style while they are experiencing this fatigue, because it will very clearly show up in the gameplay and in the content that they produce. And being a variety streamer, DSP, you actually have the luxury of playing games that you want to play whenever you want to play them. They can be any style of game. Now, that doesn't guarantee that all of these games are going to perform well or even the same, but it does seem like that this game, the one that you're experiencing this fatigue from because you just played a game in a similar vein, is one of the games that your audience could have waited to see you play further down the road when you would have wanted to play it more and you would have had a better time playing it, which would have in turn made for better content. I don't know if it's just me, but this doesn't seem like rocket science to me. This seems like something that somebody who has been doing this for 13 years full time should be able to understand by now.
All right. I'm also going to say this. After now playing 5 to 5.5 hours of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, I feel like they botched the intro. All right. And that's something hard for me to say because I love these games. I do feel like they completely dropped the ball with the intro of this game. Why? It's literally 5 hours of cutscenes and one small dungeon that lasts 20 minutes and a few random fights. So out of the first 5.5 hours I've played, I think I've actually used my controller for 30 minutes. And the other 5 hours, I'm just sitting here watching a movie. Now, the movie's good. Again, especially if you are someone who has invested into this universe and this plot line, you want this kind of story, all right? But the problem is, it's a new release. And when you have a new release like this, what you really need to do, okay, is you need to jump right into the reason why this sequel is necessary and fun. And then if you want to do this kind of major story and drama and soap opera style stuff, as they always do in this series, then you get into it. So I've suggested this, and I really feel like this is what they should have done, all right? So let's, bear with me. Let's see if you agree with me.
So before he starts spewing his absolutely regarded idea on how the game should have been designed, because obviously he knows better than the people who designed the game, I do have to ask what he means by saying that because it's a new title, you have to immediately explain why it's necessary. And fun, you can't forget the fun. And is that not what they were doing when they were showing you all of the cutscenes? Were they not explaining to you why this sequel was necessary, how the story was going to continue to progress and needed to progress? Did they not introduce fun and interesting characters for you to get attached to and want to see more of? Because if you ask me, that's what Yakuza and in turn Like a Dragon are really all about. It's all about the characters in the story. So by telling me that they spent a large portion of the intro explaining all of those things to you, that sounds pretty much on brand for Yakuza. To clarify, I've only beaten Kiwami, I've played 0, and I've seen a full playthrough of Yakuza 4. So please let me know if this new one has an excessive amount of cutscenes or something. But like I said, it does sound right on brand for what is typical in a Yakuza game. And being that he's played all of these style games before, you would think that he would know what to expect when coming into these.
Imagine if you booted up Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. The first scene of the game is Ichiban on the beach with no clothes, just like we saw in the advertisement trailer for it last year. And he has to run, and he grabs clothes, and he's running through Hawaii, and he's trying to, figure out what's going on, and he runs into a bunch of hoodlums, he's fighting them in the streets. That's the intro to the combat of the game. Then he runs into a ragtag group, and maybe it's some old people from the first game, and it's some new people. So imagine if the first 3-4 hours of this game is literally, welcome to Hawaii. Here's the new gameplay engine. Here's a new location and all the new elements and everything you're going to see. New food, new minigames, new currency, new side missions, all of that. Imagine being immersed in that right from the get-go. And 5 hours into the game, after you're immersed in this new world, finally the game says, well, wait a minute. How did we get here? Like, this is crazy, it's zany, it's fun, it's different, it's cool, it's a great sequel, but why are we here? What happened? And then the game says, all right, let's go back in time, and let's see what happened after the events of Yakuza Like a Dragon, and explain how Ichiban was working for Hello Work, was helping the Yakuza to get jobs after their families dissolved, and all the stuff that we just saw in the 5-hour intro of the game. Then it shows it, right? Because then, right from the get-go, you've immediately immerse yourself in the good parts of this game that are going to be fun and addictive, right? What ended up happening was, by doing 5 hours of story before you get to the meat of this game, you basically inundate the player. And it's, listen, okay, I get it. I want that story element, but I also want fun, because this is a video game. I'm not watching a soap opera. I'm not watching a movie. I'm playing a video game. So give me the video game first, then give me all the insane amounts of story elements, you see? And they didn't do that. I think that the pacing and the order is very screwed up. If they had used the literary device that's called in medias res, this is a literary device where you start a story in the middle, a bunch of stuff happens, and then you all stop and you say, whoa, so what happens? Let's go back and see. And then you go back to the past, and it shows you all the backstory of how you got there, and you play catch up. And then you will fast forward back to the present, and then the story continues again from there. I think that would have absolutely made sense. Like, that would have been perfect for this game.
And I don't mean to just play contrarian here, but I absolutely hate that idea, and not just because it came from DSP. I very much don't appreciate when games or movies start in a high intensity situation and then want to pull you out of that and then explain to you how you got there. It just strikes me as jarring. I want the complete story beginning to end. I've been told that the beginning is a very good place to start. And in these Yakuza style games, you very much should just come to expect that there is going to be a large amount of narrative, because it is a story-driven game. Don't get me wrong, the gameplay is fun and a huge chunk of what makes those games good. But like I said, it's the story and it's the characters that you get attached to along the way. It is a Japanese soap opera, for lack of a better term. I do think that it makes sense to start people in an area that they are comfortable with, that they are familiar with. And then as the story plays out, you do get to move into that next area, that place that you aren't familiar with. But being that you are familiar with the characters and the story and the gameplay at that point, it's not nearly as jarring as it could be. It is very strange to me how excited he is to see the game take place in Hawaii, though. As someone who has enjoyed a Yakuza style game in the past, at least once or twice, it didn't matter to me whether the story took place in Kamurocho or Sotenbori. It's all the same to me. I just want to see the game progress. I want to see the characters. But for DSP, going to Hawaii and experiencing Hawaii culture and US dollars is some grand thing that he must experience immediately. Narrative be damned.
But instead, I've now done 2 streams of the game. Barely played it, because there's nothing to really do that much in the game with the controller. It's just cutscenes, and we're not even in Hawaii yet. All right? Now, to make matters even worse, as you guys know, I told you about the fact that my wife wants to do co-op gameplay with me, right? She appeared on my stream twice over the month of January for Q&A sessions, and those were fun, but you can only answer so many questions before you start to get a little bored, and that's what happened at that second Q&A session. By the end of it, the questions were getting repetitive. We were starting to lose interest in doing it because it was getting kind of boring. We're like, well, the next time Cat comes on stream will be when we unlock this cool mode in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth that's called Dondoko. I'm finally starting to remember what it's called. Dondoko Island.
Shout out Don DeMarco, I guess. Big ups.
And what Dondoko Island is basically their take on like Animal Crossing or any other game with a virtual community. They're calling it the Resort Island. You build businesses and you build buildings and you recruit people to live there or work there. You decorate it yourself. You build a commerce structure in this island, and it's a whole other thing to itself, right? And the reviewers who've played it are actually saying it's super duper good. Like, they love it. But the thing is, someone like yesterday came to my stream and they're like, so just so you know, because we know you wanted to do this, 22 hours. I said, huh? They said, I played the game for 22 hours and I just unlocked Dondoko Island. And I was like, what? You played over, because the game's roughly around 100 hours long is what people are saying. You had to play over a fifth of the game to unlock this minigame? Like, what on earth?
And this was a problem that he was experiencing with Baldur's Gate 3 as well. For some reason, he wants to be able to play a game for about 5 to 10 hours and unlock all of the modes, all of the mini games, and be completely comfortable in all of the gameplay mechanics. Even though these games are like 100 hours long. To me, this sounds like a positive. The further you get into a game, they should still be introducing new mechanics and new variables into the world for you to have to contend with. A new mini game here, a new type of enemy there. It's those kind of aspects that keep the game interesting and keep you on your toes and always wondering what's going to be around the corner. That's what's intriguing. You shouldn't be completely comfortable after the first few hours and know what to expect. That's how games become boring and repetitive, but that's exactly what DSP wants, because then he gets to put as little effort and thought power into it as possible while still making the same amount of money. DSP is constantly putting down other gamers simply because they're not him and they play games like Fortnite or Apex Legends. And he loves to act like he's better than these people simply because he doesn't enjoy the same games that they do. And he's always going on about how they are a detriment to the gaming community as a whole because of the business practices that they support by playing the games that they enjoy. But anytime that you listen to DSP talk about a video game or criticize a video game, he is always advocating for the worst possible things to be done to them. He's always asking for the developers to hold his hand that much more. He is always asking for games to be simplified. He's always asking them to be shortened. And it's always in an effort to make these gameplay streams of his be as painless as possible for him, because he's not actually passionate about games. He's not actually interested in playing interesting games. He's only here for the money. And this specific example, just to bring it all the way back around, isn't even all that egregious. 20 hours into a 100-hour game isn't really that far. It is only a fifth, like he said. If the game were only 25 hours, I would sure hope that by 5 hours in, you're still giving me new gameplay mechanics to experience, whether that be through upgrades or mini games or however you want to do it. If I'd experienced and unlocked everything there was to unlock in a game within the first 5 hours out of a 25-hour experience, I'd be right pissed.
Again, pacing. Pacing seems to be a huge problem in video games today. How do these game directors not understand how to pace a game properly? Why not have the fun minigame open up within the first few hours of the game? Why do you have to wait over 20 hours of gameplay to get to it? So now, here's the thing. I was planning on having this fun co-op with my wife, and we even were planning. I didn't even show you guys. Literally right here, this week I bought the headphone splitter cable. So when, we're going to do co-op gameplay, I just plug this into the Xbox controller. This will split headphones, so I'll still have my neck phones, and my wife can use her own headphones. So we both have audio, right? And we could do this fun co-op of building our island community together and doing all. I think it's going to be fun. We're going to be making choices together, probably, going back and forth about, what we want to see on the island and how it's going to affect stuff. Because that's the thing. Like, ultimately, we don't know how will setting up this island affect stuff. Do you earn currency for the game? Do you unlock stuff in the game? Like, how does it work? Obviously, there's got to be a reason to do it. It's not just there to do it. It must have some kind of a payoff in the game. And if we're going to do it together, that's really cool. But the problem now is, I want you to think about this. I played 3 hours on launch day. I played 2.5 hours last night. We're playing another 3 hours on Monday, and likely one more night stream by the end of the week. So by the end of this week, 4 separate streams I played of the game will be between 10 and 12 hours into it. 10 and 12 hours into it. So now I play another week. What am I then now? 15 to 20 hours into it. I gotta play another week. 3 weeks in, I might finally unlock Dondoko Island. 3 fucking weeks in.
Well, DSP, you're the only person that's in charge of your schedule. If you absolutely must unlock that game mode before the 3-week mark, you can just change your schedule around to play more of the game now and less of the game later. Hell, you could probably even make it a day stream if you really wanted to. It's entirely up to you. But obviously that would be solving the problem, and we just can't solve the problem. We would much rather be a victim and get on stream and complain every single day and beg for pity dollars. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, categories.
I hate to say it, but this stuff, man, this is stressful to me. I'm going to open up to you guys a little bit right now, all right? This is fucking stressful to me because I have to figure out what works and what doesn't on my streams. I have to balance gameplay so that there's variety and it's not too much of the same thing over and over. I have to make sure that I'm appeasing different crowds that are going to come by different times and watch, and people who are going to be engaged with the content I put out and support it. I need to make sure all of that is happening, okay? And by the way, thank you for quite a few people right here have already contributed. And as you know, I do shout-outs at the end of the show. I want you to know I'm grateful for those who are contributing right now because of all this stuff going on right now. Anything is very appreciated. Thank you for that. So, basically, just looking at this business and streams and my schedule and everything, this is tough. Because I got to figure out what goes where, right?
Well, DSP, you're just trying to satisfy to the audience that you have cultivated. How are you unsure as to what they want? By now, you should have some rough idea of the content that they were expecting to see on a daily basis. You should be able to satisfy your core audience, which is about a little under 300 people typically. Which I want to remind you is about exactly the same amount of people that showed up for his late night Yakuza stream that he was complaining about. So the reality is he is just disappointed in the amount of core audience members that he has that will show up for anything regardless of what he's playing. But every other content creator on the platform has to make these decisions on what goes on during their streams, during their videos. Finding that balance is entirely up to you when it's you making the content. When I decide what clips we're going to take a look at or what we're going to watch during the Saturday morning streams, it's not some life or death situation. It's really just, what do I feel like looking at? What do I feel like talking about? What do I think my audience would be interested in seeing? If I watch a clip and I don't find it personally interesting, I highly doubt you guys will. And with that comes a little bit of understanding that you're not going to be interested in everything that I'm interested in. It's very clear that a lot of people are here for DSP and not King Cobra, but I like taking a look at Cobra every once in a while. I think he's interesting as well. So big ups to all of my King Cobra enjoyers. But like I said, this is not some life or death scenario. It's not that big a deal. You make these decisions and then you live with them. You make the content that you want to make. I'm really just confused as to how DSP lost his way so bad throughout the years.
Right now, I'm in the midst of a Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough that every time I play the game, people show up and engage and support it. So people want Baldur's Gate 3 to continue. And I told you guys, this particular week, there's not going to be a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 because I need to focus on the releases. But that it would come back into the stream schedule major way next week, and we would figure that out, right? So we've already got another RPG vying for stream time that people want to see, right? And then you bring in this one. It's just rough, man. You know, it's like, what do we do? How do we juggle? How do we make this work?
Well, I think that anybody with 2 brain cells left in their skull crashing together could tell you that your audience has pretty much already shown you exactly what they want. And it's in a form that you can understand. It's in the form of support. Your audience is consistently giving you the amount of support that you expect for a stream when you play Baldur's Gate 3. That should very clearly tell you that that's the thing that they are most interested in seeing. That's what they want to see you continue to do as often as possible. I have no idea why you decided to push Baldur's Gate 3 back when you were consistently getting the support that you wanted from it. Because there's a new release, the new release can just go on later. It's not that big a deal. And I hope that that's the takeaway that you get from this situation. Chasing these new releases is not the thing to do when you have something that people already have very clearly told you that they're interested in seeing.
The thing is, you know, immediately people would just say, well then, just put Like a Dragon at night. Just have Like a Dragon be night streams. I'm okay with that. If we did it, let's say we did it 3 times a week. So it's 6 hours of gameplay a week. Well, it's going to take us 2-3 months to beat it, but I'm okay with that. All right, I understand. We just played a Like a Dragon guiding game back in December, January. That took a long time to get through, and I totally get it. You know, I understand. But at the same time, if we do that, think about this way. If we only do 6 hours a week of Yakuza Like a Dragon, it could take over a month before I unlocked on Doko Island. You know? Like, this was something exciting this year. I was like, oh, my wife's coming back to streams. This is exciting, man. I can't wait to do stuff with her. And now the stuff we wanted to do, it seems like it's just screwed up. You know what I'm saying? Like, not to say that when it unlocks, it won't be fun to do. But if we have to wait a month to do it, number one, how many people are going to care? You know, I'm concerned. I'm concerned that it takes so long to unlock this mode that by the time that we finally do streams of it, no one's going to care. Right? I just think that that's really... it bums me out that this is how they've done it. 5 hours of slow cutscenes to start the game. 22 hours of gameplay to unlock the fun minigame I want to play with my wife. It's just like everything annoying about this game right now. And the fun part is, I know it's good. My wife is in Hawaii right now in the game, and she's loving it. She's like, once you get to Hawaii in the game, it gets better, and there's side stories everywhere, and the combat's better, and you know, it's cool because in Hawaii everything's based on USD, you know, American dollars, and so you get to see different cuisines and everything. It's so fun, but you gotta get there. It's like, what if it takes me 3 fucking weeks to get there, right?
This fear that he has that people aren't going to care about him and Kat doing co-op because it's a month into the game and nobody's interested in the game anymore is completely absurd if you ask me. I think that people will show up regardless simply because it is Kat playing a video game with DSP. The interaction between those two is what's gonna sell that to begin with, because it's been demonstrated very clearly that they have no chemistry during the Q&A and their interactions between each other are completely alien. So this fear that people aren't going to tune in when Kat plays a game with him, I think is just completely absurd. But his entire frustrations with this game seem to be stemming from the fact that he actually has to play the game for an amount of time before unlocking a mode that he really wanted to play with his wife. I mean, I guess I'm sorry to hear that, DSP, but I don't know why you expected the developers to take that into consideration when designing the game. Maybe if you cry and complain on YouTube loud enough, they'll give you a ring next time they're designing a game to make sure that all of the mechanics and mini games are unlocked in a time appropriate for you.
So I gotta call out modern game devs. I hate to say it, but it does seem to me like modern game devs seem to live in a bubble, right? Back in the day when there was only 2-3 RPGs a year, that was one thing. But when you have all this competition vying for your time, right? You need to have games hit that stride early on, hook you, get you interested, get you excited for what you're doing in the game. And I hate to say it, these modern RPGs don't do a good job of that, in my opinion. They dilly-dally and they beat around the bush. I don't have 20 hours to play before I get into the real part of your game. I mean, I've been talking about this for years, by the way. This isn't just a new thing. Remember when we were talking about Dying Light 2? Dying Light 2, you have to play for over 15 hours to even get to the city, which is where the real game takes place, and to get an ability to hover around. That's literally the main kind of travel in the game. You want to play 15 hours before you actually get to play the real game? Are you fucking crazy? That's why Dying Light 2 died so fast. No one liked it. People got so tired of it because the intro sucked, you know? And so, I mean, like, it's not just today. This is like 2-3 years. It's been a pattern where people making these giant lengthy games don't pace them well. And because of that, you end up with such a slow intro. As a streamer like me, it's hard to retain any kind of interest and get people hooked. Imagine if this game had a great action-packed intro. A lot more people would have seen that on launch day on Friday when they were here and said, oh, this is interesting. I want to stick around and I'll check out the streams. Most people just sat here and watched cutscenes with me for 3 hours. It's like, wow, I want to go back to sleep, you know? So how am I supposed to make that entertaining? And then if I talk over the cutscenes, oh, well, that you interrupted the story, you screwed it up. If I don't, oh, why are we doing this? This is boring. It's just you're watching a movie. Why are we even on a stream? So I can't win either way. With the way that these games are made today, you know what I'm saying?
So DSP has to call out modern game devs because he has a difficult time keeping his audience engaged and enthralled in the gameplay that he is putting on. It's funny because I don't hear any other variety style streamers making this complaint to modern game devs. And I've heard from the bull himself, King Sly, that it doesn't take 15 hours to get into the meat of Dying Light 2. In fact, all of the complaints that I heard about Dying Light 2 when the game first came out from people that I knew in real life was just that the game mechanics weren't as sound as they should have been, and the parkour was not as satisfying as they expected it to be. I'd literally never heard anybody talk about how long the intro was before DSP just mentioned it right now. And he claims that these game developers are living in this bubble, that they don't understand that there's multiple RPGs coming out a year and that these games are also rather lengthy and vying for your time. I think that they completely understand that, but they're making the game that they want to make. They think that they are making a product and they're going to be satisfied with the product when it is done. Because not everybody has to play a game as soon as it comes out. Not everybody is a variety streamer seeking day one views. If you don't have time to play a game, you just don't pick it up until you have time. Or you pick it up and you just play it when you have time. Either way really works. But of course, that never even occurs to DSP because everybody is exactly like him. He thinks that everybody is a variety streamer who plays games the exact same way that he does.
So, this is rough, all right? I don't just play one game at a time. If I was just playing one game at a time, and if all my gaming hours this week were dedicated to just Like a Dragon, think about this. That would be at least 30 to 35 hours I'd be playing Like a Dragon this week. Then probably wouldn't be concerned. We already would unlock Dondoko Island. You know what I'm saying? Like, but we would have played it 5 to 6 hours Friday, 5 to 6 hours yesterday. By today, we probably would have been a big chunk into Hawaii, and then probably tomorrow we would have unlocked Dondoko Island. How many people could sit around and play video games for at least 6 hours a day? Not many. You see my point? And again, this is me, the guy who does this for a living, can't play that much, you know, of the same game in a day. So now imagine a normal person, right? So anyway, you see the point I'm making. We need to figure this out. Because right now I'm in a situation where I know people are interested in Tekken. I'm interested in Tekken. I can't wait to play more Tekken. We're going to be doing it tonight. I'm going to tell you the schedule in a second. And that's cool. I know people want Baldur's Gate 3. All right, and they want it back. This week, we were purposefully not playing it until the very end of the streaming week, and then next week, it's going to come back into the mix as a major game again, right? But outside of that, I need to figure out how to do other stuff. And the problem is, if I play more of Like a Dragon, I face having low attendance, low engagement, low support streams for weeks. But then I'll unlock Dondoko Island earlier, and I can do co-op streams with my wife. But if I don't do that, and Like a Dragon just becomes a night stream game, we potentially could have it end up being, this very slow, almost dead night stream for several weeks to a month before we even unlock Dondoko Island, risking the fact that by the time that we unlock it, if I play it with my wife, no one will care because the game's already dead. You know what I'm saying?
But if this is something that you were interested in doing and actually looking forward to, you know, co-op streams with your wife so you can spend time with her and allow your audience to engage with her as well, you wouldn't think that it would be that big of a deal if it was low support, low engagement, and dead style stream. Because it's something that you were actually looking forward to, something that you want to do. But of course, I know that that's not how DSP works. He doesn't actually care about enjoying the streams. I could say that for the rest of my life and it'll always be true. It just be a waste of my breath.
Like, I'm gonna be honest, last night's stream disheartened me tons, because I am waiting anxiously to get to the good parts of this game when you get to Hawaii. And I knew that we had to get through more story. It was like the intro dungeon, so it was like the introduction to how the dungeons are going to be. Very similar to the first game, except the combat's refined and different. So we're doing it. I'm looking. I was like, attendance is going down. Almost zero support, by the way. And again, not that every stream is about that, because it's not. As long as it balances out, it doesn't matter. And that's the thing. If this game's going to be like a late night chill stream game, then I can balance it with everything else. But, I mean, I got like 3 tips all night and like 1 super chat. And that was it. It's like, that's the whole stream. And again, it's not about that. But it's a factor. For sure, it's a factor, right?
So it's not about the support, but it is a factor. It's always a factor, but it's not about that. It's not about that, but I'm going to bring it up and act as though it's a huge deal. I can totally balance it out, except the day after it happens, I'm going to get on stream and complain about it a bunch and act as though I've already tried to rectify the situation, even though I haven't really allowed any time to pass at all. And this is why it's so important that you enjoy streaming and the content that you make before you ever make money doing it, before you ever try and make it a job or a career. Because the last thing you ever want to do is come off like DSP does. Just ungrateful and only in it for the cash.
I'm like, this is the second stream of the game, and already it's this dead? I think, again, it's because we just played a Like a Dragon game. It just sucks that they were back-to-back like that, you know? It had been a while since we played one, and now people are excited to come back to that universe. You know, that's different. We just fucking played Like a Dragon, right? So I kind of get it. I understand. So anyway, what we really need to figure out, okay, is we need to figure out how we're going to do this and how it's going to continue. Because already for the month of February coming up, right, there's not that much else going on.
Well, if there's nothing going on for the rest of February, DSP, it doesn't sound like your job's really going to be all that difficult and you should be able to figure it out in no time. And there was a little bit here on the end where he was complaining about Suicide Squad, but I already made a Suicide Squad video and I don't want to do it again. So that's going to be the end of this video, but of course it's another big shout out to Duty Streams for the clip in this one. As always, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. Big shout out to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. And a special big ups to all of my members. I appreciate all of you guys so much. It means the world to me. But hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video. But until then, make sure that you check out other detractor channels and dive deeper into that. Snortex.